time, so thank you all for coming to the morning coffee. We have quite a busy schedule today with quite a few speakers. So I'd like to get started first by introducing Mr. Lee and Emma, who'd like to say a few words. And after that, we'll go into the agenda for the rest of the next 1 hour.
Hi everyone, just really briefly just want to say good morning and thank you for coming today. It's great to see that our numbers are increasing. We know that you have busy schedules as well too. Today we have some guests to kind of talk through things related to high school. Some of you also have children in middle school and maybe in elementary as well too, so we understand there's a lot of different opportunities for you to connect. Festivals coming up, you've been hearing about it a lot. You'll be hearing some updates from us as well too. Experiential learning and extracurriculars are in full swing. Maybe one bit of advice to chat with your child about a little bit is how busy they are, especially with a lot of extracurriculars. So that's one thing that we're finding is that a lot of students maybe spread themselves a little too thin by trying to lead this activity, join this activity, MUN, student council. There's a whole bunch of different parts. And just like all of us as adults, we feel it all the time. When we're involved in too many projects, it's difficult to devote all of our energy and ensure that each project is done very well. And so that has an impact on our own kind of health and well-being and how we're able to work with others and make sure that we're doing our part. So that's maybe one little conversation to have. But otherwise, academics are in full swing, classes are in full swing, and student life proceeds. So far, the device policy of encouraging students to not have their phones out during the day, it's been going fairly well. I know that parents are somewhat pleased about that, and we're also getting good feedback from students. There are some that are still struggling a little bit and are asking for more access to their devices throughout the day, but that's feedback that we're taking in on a daily basis. But anyways, thank you so much for coming today, and on to our next guest.
Yes, so thank you. Yes, so next we have Ms. Dawson, who is our high school counselor. She'll be spending the next 10 minutes or so to give you some tips and advice on high school counseling. And then after that, we have Ms. Louie as well, who will be talking about the academics advice. This is based on the request from the last coffee meetings we had with some of you guys here. And then we'll wrap up with a bit of update regarding the Festival of Nations around 9:15, 9:20. Okay, so please introduce you to Ms. Dawson.
Hi, good morning everyone. I'm Bethany Dawson, the high school counselor. I've met many of you before. It's nice to see some familiar faces. I'm not sure if I have enough planned for a full 10 minutes, but we'll see how long this takes. So kind of echoing what Mr. Lee was saying, we're really looking at student well-being. Well, I'm always looking at student well-being, and one of those is definitely our students spreading themselves a little too thin. One thing that we're continuing this year is the Komodo Well-Being Surveys. For those of you who are maybe new to our school, you might not be familiar. Our students complete a very short well-being survey every 2 weeks. Excuse me. And that's partially so that myself and the principals, each student's advisor or homeroom teacher can kind of check in and make sure that things are going well for them. And it can help with the advisor check-ins to guide their conversation to say, oh, I see that your sleep is going great, but maybe you're using your device a lot and maybe that's not a great balance or great, digital well-being is what it would be called. But it's also really important because the students can actually see their well-being and they can see the data as it goes throughout the year. It shows them like a graph. So you as parents don't have access to this. That's part of what we hope makes the students, it's very few people who can look at this data, so hopefully it encourages them to be honest. We don't want it to be something that we're scrutinizing them about or making them feel bad or in trouble, but it's helpful for them to be able to self-manage and regulate. And so some of the questions that they're being asked are things like the quality of their sleep, how much time they're on stress they're feeling? Do they feel like they can balance their academics and extracurriculars? Are they having, good social interactions, things like that? And then actually this year we're introducing a second survey, so it'll be on a rotating schedule. And the second one is a bit more positive, uplifting, so encouraging the students to think about things that they're proud of, grateful for, feeling, I don't remember all those questions because we haven't had that one yet this year. But the idea is that the students can be really honest in it, and then they can track for themselves and be able to see for themselves, okay, when I'm really stressed, my sleep goes down, and that means my well-being overall is going down. So what can I do to fix this or mitigate this a little bit? And that can also help with their conversations with their advisors as well when they have their regular advisor check-ins. So that's something we've been doing now for a little over a year. We work really closely with Komodo, so they're great to give us, listen to our feedback and what's working for our school. And so it's also really helpful as a school we can see overall data. So not just looking at an individual student, but looking at grade level or high school division level, what are the trends? Not surprisingly, the lowest score is, I think, always been either stress or sleep. So students are feeling stressed and they're not necessarily getting enough sleep. And those, I'm sure, go hand in hand, right? When we're feeling stressed, we don't necessarily get a lot of sleep. If we don't get enough sleep, it's hard for us to regulate our emotions, and so we're feeling the stress more and more. So one thing that we're really trying to push on the students this year is the importance of them getting regular sleep at home at night.
You have to specify.
Yes, I do have to specify, because some students try and do this funky thing where they get home at like 4 and then take like a quote-unquote nap, but it's 5 hours long, and then they wake up really late and then kind of stay up and they think, oh, that works for me. And maybe it's working in the short term, but long term that's not really going to be very healthy or helpful for them. So one thing that we're doing is if students are either so tired or feeling sick, like a headache or a stomachache from lack of sleep, they're welcome to rest in the infirmary, but just for about 30 minutes. And if they're still that exhausted, feeling that sick, we're gonna ask them to go home for the day, because the idea is you should be sleeping at home, you shouldn't be sleeping at school, right? If you sleep at home, you're awake during school time, you can listen to your teachers. So I really hope that you can encourage at home. If you need to implement like a bedtime or something, you can do that. Actually, I hope some of you were able to maybe make the counselors, we just had a workshop about healthy routines and habits. If you weren't able to make it, we've recorded it and it's already up on the parent portal along with the slides. And so there's resources there, so we definitely go over sleep and other habits that could really help with hopefully mitigating some of that stress a little bit. Besides that, please reach out to me anytime that you have particular questions or concerns. Besides being here for the students, I'm a resource to you as parents as well. And of course, encourage your child, if you're noticing that they're feeling overwhelmed or stressed or maybe need some help or guidance with certain things, you can encourage them to come and talk to me anytime, and I'd be very happy to do so. So I think we got kind of close to 10 minutes, so I'll leave you with that. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope that we can talk more some other time. All right, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Next is, let me introduce you. I think some of you may or may not have met her, but she's our high school academic and higher education counselor, right?
Yep.
Yes, Ms. Louis. Thank you.
Hi. I have a very fancy PowerPoint, so. Oh, it's my water bottle. Sorry. Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you to Mrs. Feld for inviting me to come to today's coffee morning session. I've actually never attended one myself. And when she asked me, I was like, yeah, I would love to come. And then as I was putting the PowerPoint together, I was like, oh, what should I put? Like, higher ed can be very complicated. And it contains a lot of information, obviously, depending like where you go, what kind of child you have. So I tried to go like brief today, but I would like to emphasize like my counseling approach is very like personalized. So it really depends on students' interests, their strengths and weaknesses, what they're thinking of going, and also like family situation as well. So all the different factors will play a role when a student is deciding where they want to apply to and where they go in the future. So like I said, I'll do an overview today, but if you have like specific questions you'd like to ask for your family or for your child, please feel free to ask me later on. So I'll be hanging around for a bit after today's presentation. Oh, okay. So this is just, I guess, a quick high school higher ed timeline for high school students. So grade 9, that's when they start to have higher ed sessions during period 6. So a few weeks ago, they already had one introduction from me, which is a very brief intro. And then later on, in January, they will be introduced to a platform where they will be able to do personality assessments, career aptitude tests, and they will also use the same platform for university research, looking at the careers library. So there's a lot of resources in the platform where they can kind of start looking at different careers and options for university or higher education. Grade 9s are also invited to attend as many university visits as they want. If parents have not subscribed to our Google University Visit Calendar, please do so, because that's where I publish all the university visits in school or outside of school, and all the information are on there. If there's a university visit in school, you are welcome to come along if you're free. So just email me in advance, so I'll let main office know that you're going to be coming. Like today we have NYU and Northeastern. Most of the visits are at between 11:45 to 12:30, but every now and then we do have after school hours as well. So we do encourage students to attend as many as they can, even though they're not interested in that particular university. If they're interested in that country, it would still be good for them to come and listen, because they will never find out on the web, like everything on the website. So it's always nice to have that person doing a presentation, and then you can ask specific questions. There are no mandatory one-on-one meetings with grade 9s, those are optional. If they feel like they want to talk about their careers or they want to find out more about higher ed, they're welcome to email me for an appointment, and I can schedule that with them. For grade 10 students, again, there are higher ed sessions in period 6. They will have one next week, which is about PSAT, and then in November, in November, they will also have a higher ed session about IB course selection, which is a very important step as they move into grade 11 and 12 for IBDP or IB courses. And then later on, they will also be getting more higher ed sessions, just learning about the different systems, how degrees are different from country to country, how majors are different from country to country, kind of just like an introduction to that. And then again, university visits. In January, that's when grade 10 students will have a mandatory one-on-one meeting with me. And that meeting, it's more about their IB courses. They need to understand what kind of courses they want to study in the future, and then think about what kind of IB courses will be best for them moving forward to higher ed. Obviously, there's a slide later on talking about entry requirements. Obviously, what you study in IBDP or IB courses may impact what kind of choices you have in the future. So my job is really to guide them, making sure they're opening their options as much as possible, but at the same time, balancing what they're capable of and what their aspirations are. And then grade 11, that's when things kind of get a bit chaotic and busy. They will have more and more higher ed sessions, but this is very country specific in terms of university research. So I will help them what they should be looking at, giving them resources, giving them websites, how they should be looking at different universities out there. Because there are a lot, and I know sometimes with what you see on the internet, it can be like information overloaded. So I'm kind of here to guide them. And then towards end of grade 11, the higher ed sessions are basically preparing them for university applications. And they go from how to write a UK personal statement, how to write a US college essay, how to write a Japanese essay, etc., etc. More university visits. Grade 11s right now, they have 2 mandatory one-on-one meetings with me, one in January and then one in like May, June before summer holiday. And then the one before summer holiday, basically we'll be talking more specifically about strategies of their university application, looking at their grades over the last couple of years in high school, and then define a list of schools where it will cover their high reach, match schools, and safety schools as well. And then grade 12, pretty much all of the above, and mainly applying to universities. So all their higher ed sessions will be on creating university application accounts, trying to fill everything out together, because sometimes that can be quite complicated. And then they will be applying to university. Most of our students will be applying to universities with predicted grades. So what are predicted grades? Thanks, Nina. So this is a sample of what CSEN high school transcript looks like. If a student has been at CSEN since grade 9, they will have grade 9 data all the way up until grade 12. So we don't actually report semester 1 report grades. So what you see here, this column, for grade 9 MYP courses, these are end of year grades. So what you will receive in June. And then similarly for grade 10, grade 11 as well. So grade 12 right now, it's empty. So when students apply to universities, if they require to send a transcript, this is kind of what we send, and then grade 12 will be blank, because those grades will be plugged in after they graduate from CSEN, when they receive their final report card. However, aside from the transcript, we sent a separate sheet of document, which we call college predicted grades. So these are forecast results from each IB subject teacher. So knowing that they have been teaching the students since beginning of grade 11, they will provide a grade to me where they think what students will achieve after IB exams. And those predicted grades will be sent off to university as part of their university application for universities to assess their academic capabilities. Is that okay? And just to, sorry, I would also like to make a note. On the transcript, we do report days of absent and days of tardies throughout the year. So just a quick glance. I didn't put down all the countries, but these are the most popular countries where our students tend to go to after CSEN. So I would say Japan has been the most popular destination over the last 3 years. Maybe the first 2 years since I've been here, it's more about COVID. Like parents are not sure whether borders is still going to be closed. They didn't know what the visa situation was going to be like. So students kind of parents want to keep their child in Japan. But I think last year it was more about the exchange rate, which is fair enough, because you do have to look into that and consider that as a factor when sending your child over. For families who are thinking about studying in Japan, around 30% of the courses in Japan that are taught in English. So the rest are fully taught in Japanese. So most of our students, they tend to go for an English taught program because they've been studying at an international school for a long time, and obviously before they go off to university, they are at CSEN, where it's an English taught curriculum. So for students to go on to a Japanese taught curriculum, sometimes it can be difficult, especially if they're thinking about studying sciences, because they can't really translate like protein to Japanese or calcium to Japanese. Like it can get quite difficult. However, we do have like, every now and then, we do have like a couple of students going into like, for example, medicine, where there isn't an English taught program in medicine, and then they will have to do it in Japanese. Then they can use the 9-month gap between May to January to study, I guess, to prepare themselves for a Japanese taught program by studying some of the syllabus in Japanese. Because all Japanese taught programs don't start until April. English taught programs can start in September. So if students are looking at Japanese taught program, they will have to graduate from Seisen end of May and then wait for close to 1 year before they can start university again. And then US schools, it is pretty much like a holistic approach. Apart from grades, they do also want to look at your, like I would say extracurricular activities are very important. So US applications, there's one page dedicated to just extracurricular activities, where students can report up to maximum 10 in total. So these extracurricular activities don't have to be just within school. They can be outside of school. Even just taking art lessons outside of school, consider as an extracurricular activity. So it's really trying to see how students are spending their hours outside of school curriculum. And then more importantly, US look at good fit. So looking at what you're studying, looking at what you've done and your personality, are you a good fit for the university? That's what they tend to pay attention to more. For Canada, I would say mainly grades. Some universities, they do ask for an extracurricular activities profile, and some courses require an online interview as well. In UK, even more so, grades are really important. But because UK schools, they offer a 3-year degree. So students will start their major from day one. And so what they care about is how passionate you are in the subject area that you're applying to. Whereas US and Canada, it's pretty much like undeclared. So you can go to the university without declaring a major, and you can kind of use your first 2 years to study, a bit of everything, and then decide what you want to do in your 3rd year, and then declare that as a major. Whereas UK, they don't have that flexibility. So the more competitive the university is, the more they care about how much you want to study that subject for the next 3 years. So being passionate in the subject, it's really important for students applying to UK. And then Australia, Europe, Asia, I would say they kind of just look at grades. So what do the universities see when our students submit an application? So students applying to Japan, they will need to submit their school transcript with predicted grades. They will need to write individual essays for individual programs. So for example, Waseda has 6 English taught programs in total. Obviously, I wouldn't be advising students to apply to all 6, but there are a couple that are quite similar, such as SILS, School of Liberal Studies, and SPSE, which is School of Political Science and Economics. So it is still kind of in the social sciences area, and sometimes when students make an application in grade 12, they may not be able to make that decision. Then I would say, yeah, you can apply to both programs at the same time and see what you get. But if they're applying to both programs, they are expected to write different essays. So the more programs, not university, the more programs you apply to in Japan, the more essays you will have to write. And then teachers will also have to submit letter of recommendations. Depending on the university and program, sometimes it's 1, but sometimes they ask for as much as 3. For US school, again, school transcript with predicted grades, and they have to write essays for individual universities, letter of recommendations, and also an extracurricular activity portfolio, which they have to submit. For Canada's transcript with grades, depending on the university, sometimes they will have to declare what kind of extracurricular activities they've done, and some courses will require an online interview, as mentioned earlier. In UK, they don't look at transcripts. So all they look at is grades. MYP final grades in grade 10 and then grade 12 predicted grades. That's it. They look at how passionate you are in the subject by submitting an essay called personal statement. It's a 4,000 character personal statement where they kind of just need to show how you're interested by what you've done outside of school. Like, are you doing extra reading? Have you done internship? Do you have community service work that's related to the subject that you're applying to? For example, students who are thinking about like medicine or any like health sciences related courses, they will probably need community service work to demonstrate that they enjoy working with people. They like helping people out, like those kind of things. And then some courses will require an online interview or an online assessment. So normally I would say those are for like competitive universities and competitive courses such as like Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, computer science, engineering, medicine. Those kind of courses tend to have an interview or an online assessment. And students applying to Australia, Europe and Asia, they need to submit transcript with predicted grades. And then we also need to submit letter of recommendations depending on country as well.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Could I ask what is that recommendation letter 1 to 3?
Sorry?
1 to 3%.
It's with 3 certifications.
Oh, it's quantity, yeah. So sometimes they ask for only one letter of recommendation, but sometimes they ask for 2 or 3. Yeah.
Different subjects.
3, yeah. So as a counsellor, I do write 1 for every student. And then the student will need to approach a second or third IB subject teacher for a second or third letter of recommendation. So IB entry requirements, I'm sure parents who have a child in grade 9 or 10 might be interested in this. Again, this is just like a guide. So sometimes it really depends on the country, the university, and also like the specific course to determine what kind of IB courses they need before they apply. But generally speaking, all health science courses will require biology and chemistry at HL. Also, I would say chemistry HL is even more important. To open as many doors as possible, biochem HL would be needed. But if for whatever reason, it's better for the student to take one science HL and one science at SL, then I would say chemistry will be the one that needs to be at HL rather than biology. Students thinking about engineering very often is chemistry, physics, math, HL. Computer science, they really look at the math course, so most of the time they require an HL course just because of how mathematical the course is. Commerce and business, math AISL is not accepted by some countries. For law, especially in the UK, English HL is preferred by a lot of universities. Architecture, you will probably see physics as an entry requirement, but not art. So even students who are thinking about art and design, they may not need to study art in IB because sometimes they can do art like outside of school. They may enjoy drawing themselves or designing on apps. Like we have so many students where they kind of just self-taught themselves how to use like, what are they called? Like Adobe, whatever. Like something that I just cannot do myself. But you know, in their spare time, that's what they do. And then they can actually build a pretty good portfolio just by doing that outside of school. So similarly with like architecture, art and design, where you have to submit an art portfolio, IB art, it's not a requirement, just for your information. So they can do it outside of school if they want. And the students who are thinking about economics, again, depending on the university, sometimes they do require math at a high level because econ can be a very mathematical course. But there are also other universities such as KO, the Pearl program. It's not as mathematical based, it's slightly more theoretical based, then they're okay with a lower math IB course as well. So some of the common questions which I get asked all the time, and some parents also indicated on the survey, so I'll try to cover that today. Is SAT, ACT mandatory? Simple answer is no. So right now, well, because of COVID, a lot of US schools have turned to SAT, ACT optional because like some countries just couldn't administer SAT, schools were closed, all different sorts of reasons, so they said SAT optional. Now that COVID is kind of over, they are reviewing the situation. And last year, only 2 US universities have said, okay, we're going back to SAT mandatory. And those 2 universities are Purdue and Florida State. The rest of the universities are saying SAT, ACT optional until class of 2025, which is current grade 11s. So I do check quite regularly on university updates. So normally, as soon as I find out, I will try and inform students. But if you're not that, if Purdue and Florida State, it's not a must, then I would say maybe you don't have to take SAT. It just depends on the student. Like some students, SAT tends to be like easy for them. Like it's just the right style of testing. They don't need to spend too much time revising, and I would say, okay, go take it, just as an extra kind of external test result that they can submit to university. But I would say 80% of our students tend to not do as well in SAT. Then I would say you might as well just focus in IBDP or IB courses, because even though you've taken SAT or ACT, we still have to submit your school grades. We can't just submit SAT and not school grades. So if SAT and ACT is not mandatory, why would you not put your 100% effort in your high school curriculum and make that your core factor to get into university? So a lot of parents and students also ask, oh, should I take SAT and ACT for Japanese schools or Korean schools? I would say Korean schools would probably want to see SAT, ACT schools, just because how competitive they are. But Japanese universities, all of our students last year who went to a Japanese university, none of them submitted SAT. Some of them have taken it, but compared to what they've achieved in school, it's actually not going to give them an advantage because they're not scoring as high as what they're scoring in school. So then I would say don't send off your SAT score. So I hope I've kind of made any questions, because I know SAT and ACT is a very common question amongst the parent community. All grade 10s have to take PSAT in school. So if you're a grade 10 parent, you would have received an email from me yesterday that all grade 10 students will be taking PSAT on 27th of October. So PSAT, which is the practice test of SAT, it's just a practice test. So we like students to take it because it really helps them to understand what it's like to be in a real exam situation, because we follow everything that College Board says in terms of what an external examination should look like, how students should do in terms of even the moment they walk in to the exam room, how they should behave. So we run through all that with them. But then the score that they receive, it's just to themselves. They don't get sent off to universities. So I feel like the grade 10 PSAT result is a good indication whether students should go and take SAT or not. If they score a high enough PSAT score, then maybe it's worthwhile to spend some time in SAT and to do the real exam. If it's not, then maybe you can just avoid it. It's IELTS and TOEFL needed. Most of the time, no, because students who are studying IB at CSEN, it is mandatory for them to take English A literature. A stands for first language. So that is already an indication of their English proficiency. And because they're studying at an international school where English is the medium of instruction, we give that information to universities as well. However, there's always a small number of universities where they just don't want to waive exception because you're studying at an international school or you're studying a different curriculum. So they kind of just want to standardize everything, and they want students to take IELTS and TOEFL. So Keio University in Japan is probably a good example. So it doesn't matter like where you're from, what curriculum you're studying, you still have to take IELTS or TOEFL. If you take IELTS TOEFL, the score will last for 2 years. So for students who are not sure whether they're studying in Japan or Korea, like if they're like US only or Canada only, then I would say you can just ignore it. Ignore IELTS and TOEFL. But if they're thinking more about like countries in Asia, that's probably the time when they really want to think about taking TOEFL or IELTS during the summer between grade 11 and 12. IELTS and TOEFL is not something they have difficulties with. It is really just an English proficiency test, testing their listening skills, reading skills, writing skills, and speaking skills. So if they've been at an international school for long enough, then they tend to be able to ace it. They don't really need to study, but it will just be their time to take the test and also a bit of parents' money to pay for the test. So if they're unsure where they want to go, maybe it's worthwhile just taking it the summer between grade 11 and 12 and just to get it over and done with. Should my child take IB diploma or IB courses? So this is something, again, like it's a more personalized college counseling advice session between myself and your child. And parents, if you want to come and listen or you like to find out more, then you can have an appointment with me. IB diploma obviously opens a lot more doors compared to IB courses. However, what we've seen, some students, they do thrive in IB courses. And again, this will depend on where they want to go, what they want to study in the future. Students who are thinking about like art and design, they don't need to do IB diploma because all they want to see is the portfolio, how creative you are. So the way how the IB diploma is designed may not be suitable, may not allow you to allow your child or the student to kind of showcase what they have. So again, like we will have that conversation one-on-one. Which subject should my child choose for IB in grade 11? So we will obviously talk about that in grade 10, and there are a lot of university websites that we can look at to find out the different requirements. Sometimes we may need to make a tough decision. While you want to open as many doors as possible, but you also need to look at students' strengths as well. If putting her in a math high-level class will mean she's gonna suffer or not being able to balance her subjects, then might be a good idea for her to take the lower math course. Maybe a few options will close, but there will always be other options for her, and she will thrive in the IB diploma program with that kind of combination. Which country or countries should I choose? This is a really difficult question, and I know parents will have a lot of say in that, especially the financial piece. Again, this will depend on, sometimes it depends where your family is from, nationality, what courses they offer, how much flexibility a student needs. We have a lot of students where they just have absolutely no idea what they want to study. If so, then going to the UK might be difficult because they won't be able to pick a major. If we force them to pick a major, there's a good chance that they may drop out or they have to transfer. So maybe Canada and US is a better option. We also have students who are, they think about the location a lot. They're born and raised in Tokyo. They're used to living in a cosmopolitan city. But in reality, a lot of places in Canada, UK, and US, some universities, they're pretty suburban. Like when I say suburban, I'm talking about like maybe 30,000 people in one city or one small town. And our students may not like it, or they might not be able to get used to it because the transition it's so different. And obviously, like cultural differences. Like there is so much that we need to consider, and even weather. Like when I tell students about winter depression in the UK or Europe, they don't believe me. They laugh. But if you've been to UK, you would know. 3 hours of daylight, it's true. But because they've never lived there, it's really hard for them to imagine what it's going to be like. When they travel during summer to look at like universities, they do like campus tours, they are probably seeing the best side of UK and Europe. So I know it's hard for them to imagine. Like I try and give them information, give them all the pros and cons, but again, like these are things that they kind of really need to think through. Like sometimes students, they get there, they're shocked, but then they can kind of bite their tongue and get through it. But some students may not be able to. So this will depend on individual students' personality, and we kind of talk about that in our one-on-one meetings. Are there any scholarships? Yes, there are a lot of scholarships, but again, this will depend on the country and your nationality and what kind of scholarships you're looking for. Briefly speaking, there are 2 types of scholarships. One is called merit-based and one is called financial-based. When it's merit-based, the universities will be looking at the transcript and predicted grades, how students are performing in school academically. But then, in order for students to receive a scholarship, they need to be achieving above what the university is looking for. So, for example, if a university entry requirement is roughly 35 IB points, if you're on 35, the chances of your child getting a scholarship will be harder. But if you're getting 38 or above, you're pretty much achieving higher than what they're looking for. Then the chances of receiving the scholarship will also be higher. So the more competitive the school is, the harder it is for them to award scholarships as well. And sometimes scholarship applications will involve an interview, will involve essays. And then the next type, it's financial need based. So universities will be looking at individual families' income, parents' asset, and determine whether you fit into the financial need category. But past experiences and also what parents have told me, for seasoned parents, to get a financial need-based scholarship, it's quite difficult because of what you're earning right now or the kind of assets you have now. So maybe compared to the seasoned community, you may not be making as much. However, if you compare what you're earning here to some of the US families, you are above the bracket. So it is much harder for our parents to receive financial aid. But also this will depend on your nationality, because a lot of US schools, they don't give financial aid to international students. So if you're not a US citizen, if you're not a US permanent resident or green card holder, then you're not eligible to apply. So they will only give it to US citizens or US permanent residents. But then, even if our students are holding onto a US passport, it doesn't mean they are a US resident because of tax purposes. So they're not eligible for like local fees or local financial aid until they move back to the States for at least 1 year to gain the US residency back. Then they can start applying for like government loans and apply and to receive like local rates. So similarly in the UK as well, if you're not living in the UK, the chances of you being granted local fees or local rates is actually pretty slim. It will really depend on your situation. So UK schools will send parents or students an email where you need to fill in the home fee status questionnaire. So it's like a 12-page long questionnaire where you really need to report a lot of things, including how much you have in your bank, how much you're earning, what assets you have, but also how often do you travel to UK? Like they don't want to think that you're permanently staying in Japan. So they have to do a lot of assessments before they tell you whether you can be granted for local rates or not. This is a tough question, but it will depend on individual family circumstance in order to determine what kind of scholarships are available for your child and family. And the last question is ranking. So I get that quite a bit. I would like to send my child overseas if it's like a top 100 university. The reality is when the university is hitting top 100, then it is very competitive to get into. But then also ranking sometimes can be a bit like all over the place. Sorry, next slide. So this is just 2 screenshots I've taken off from QS ranking. So the left side is from QS ranking, and the right side is Times Higher Education. So I kind of just narrowed it down to Japan. And I don't know whether you can see, but for example, Osaka University, according to QS, is ranked 80. But then if you look at Times Higher Education, it's between 251 to 300. So you can see it's really, really different depending on the organization or the company who's putting these rankings together. So while this is a good indication of the ranking, but then I would say don't look at it, just don't solely look at rankings and nothing else, because some rankings are based on research. So the more money the university has, the more research they will be able to publish. But that has nothing to do with teaching. Yeah, that doesn't say much about the professors or the school community or what the undergraduate courses are like, because research is always at a postgraduate level. But our students are going off to an undergraduate school. And some rankings are purely based on student satisfaction as well. So so my point is rankings, you can look at it, but do look at other factors and other resources as well. Don't just look at rankings and base your university application list based on that. Yeah. So sorry, I know it is quite a bit of information here, but this is pretty much the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions if there's time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Louise. So as you can see, there's a lot of information there. I don't think you can digest all of this, but I know that she's always accessible and available if you need to. Is this possible to share that with us? Or
Yes,
do they
I'll
need-
email it to Mr.
Okay.
Liu.
On the portal.
Okay. Yes. So my advice, I have a grade 11 daughter, and she's going through this right now, and I think it's very important that there's a lot of information out there on the internet. You hear a lot of stuff, different things from different people in your community, but my advice is speak to the expert. As you can see, she knows a lot. So check with Ms. Louis before making any conclusion or decision for your daughter. So I also know that there are grade 9, 10, 11, and grade 12 reps in this group. So also you can check with them as well, because they have experienced some of this, so they can give you a second opinion as well. So thank you very much, Ms. Louis, for the presentation.